Hello, everyone. What is up? Welcome back to another Tao Te Ching reading to discuss the Tao Te Ching, one of our favorite books. We talk about this a lot on and off camera, but we should hit the record button more often, you and I, because you never know what craziness is going to come out. But
Hmm.
because this book is so amazing, it's so thought-provoking, it's so elusive, it's so powerful. There's so many interesting ways to see the mundane in life and also the profound in life. And this book, no matter what the translation is, always has a really poetic way of bringing things about and just allowing us to use our thoughts and feelings a little bit more and try to figure out what how this is applied to our lives, maybe personally, maybe in society, maybe at the whole world
Hmm.
at large, the cosmos. And you can
Hmm.
just expand it and contract it in so many ways. It's so interpretive and it's a lot of fun. As you can tell, we enjoy doing this. So
Hmm.
we are going to talk about number 50 today, 50. And I will kick it off to Mr. Adam here to read it.
Thank you.
We'll probably read a couple different versions, talk about it, and then see where it takes us, like the
Sure.
dad.
I'm just going to add one more adjective to that amazing list of adjectives you mentioned, which is one of
Mm.
my favorites, which is the Dao De Jing is juicy. It's extremely juicy.
It is juicy.
Okay. So 50, Ursula Le Guin's translation, which we'll look at today, she calls this chapter Love of Life. But this is 50. Okay. Her translation. To look for life is to find death. The 13 organs of our living are the 13 organs of our dying. Why are the organs of our life where death enters us? Because we hold too hard to living. So I've heard if you live in the right way, when you cross country, you needn't fear to meet a mad bull or a tiger. When you're in a battle, you needn't fear the weapons. The bull would find nowhere to jab its horns, the tiger nowhere to stick its claws, the sword nowhere for its point to go. Why? Because there's nowhere in you for death to enter.
Yeah, man. So this definitely is juicy.
True. Dripping from my stash here.
Yeah, number 50, it's a good one. There was an interesting thing in your translation that I hadn't seen in any of I have three different books here, and I didn't see anything about the 13 organs.
Ah, I wonder if that's direct. That feels like it's directly in the text, like the actual original translation. It sounds like, is that not a like a paradigm or a concept within Taoism that you're familiar with?
13 organs.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd have to go through them all, but 13 is interesting because it's
Yeah.
the divine feminine number. But there are
Ah.
organ systems in traditional Chinese medicine that work
Hmm.
within certain parameters of elements,
Hmm.
the heart and the fire, and the
Hmm.
gallbladder and the liver with the wood. And a
Interesting.
lot of how acupuncture is done based on the meridians of the organs, these organ channels,
Yeah.
organ systems. Like the kidneys, for example, they don't even necessarily refer to as a an organ.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
more like an
system.
organ system.
Makes sense.
So much, right?
Yeah.
But I have to see how the 13 play. But what was the line about those organs again?
Yeah, the 13 organs of our living are the 13 organs of our dying. And so it says, why are they? Because we hold on too hard to living.
Yeah, so that's interesting. There's
Yeah.
all different translations in these other ones talking uh about celebrating life. Just give you an example here from this
Mm.
McDonald version. Those who leave the womb at birth and those who enter their source at death, of these, 3 out of 10 celebrate life, 3 out of 10 celebrate death, and 3 out of 10 simply go from life to death.
Interesting.
So there's obviously numbers that
Yeah.
being in reference to some sort of dichotomy or way things function in a sort of
Yeah, or how people tend to like map on this idea of like life, death, or like not even conscious awareness of either.
yeah, because this is saying again here, 3 and 10 are followers of life, 3 and 10 are followers of death. and the men passing just from birth to death also number 3 and 10. So that equals 9.
Yeah, so you got one more,
But there's
which
maybe
I
one,
guess is this way.
yeah,
Yeah.
margin of error, right? But
Yeah.
I like how it kind of breaks it up into just the way you see life,
Yeah.
right? 3 and 10 are followers of life. So vibrant, passionate,
Yes.
doing the things that they're meant to be doing,
Yes.
living, striving, right? And then there's 3 and 10 that are followers in death, always seeing things in as pessimistic or are stuck in some sort of sickness or
Yeah.
trauma or some sort of negative pattern or loop. And
Hmm.
then another 3 just passing from birth to death, just
Just not
kind of like
even, just moving through the motions.
moving through it, for
Hmm.
better or for worse,
Hmm.
whatever, aware, unaware, maybe not. Uh, which does that relate, in your opinion, to the whole organ thing that yours is talking about?
It feels very different, honestly. It is interesting. But I would say that's a difficult one to thread. I mean, with the 13 organs to me, especially with a traditional Chinese medicine, it kind of speaks to me about like both physical, the overlap between physical and what's called like subtle anatomy,
Hmm.
right? Like what like other systems call like energy centers or chakras or things like this. Um, so I can kind of see how like the organs connecting with what you're describing is like, I guess like the way my mind's trying to integrate them is like if you think about the organs as like sensory sensory processing centers, right?
They all have a role to play.
They'll
Yeah.
have a role to play in like incorporating our environment into our being and then moving us back into our environment, right? They're all doing that at different functionalities and different specializations.
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess it's kind of to me is like mapping to the fact that at a human level, there's people that are operating at different levels as well, in terms of maybe that more human dynamic that is becoming through the Tao, right? Or arising from the Tao and then returning to the Tao, right? In the
Hmm.
Taoist frame, if we're using the Taoist framework. So I don't know, but it is kind of it's very interesting the like the gradations that they mentioned, the categories of like where people are, and then this elusive 1 out of 10 that's not named.
There's
But yeah,
always
that's a
one.
tricky one.
There's always one, right? One outlier.
Now I'm thinking of like the one dentist. 9 out of 10 dentists. So
Four
who's
out of
that one? But anyway, um, but yeah, I want to add also to what you were saying, like the whole encapsulation of your translation, what it was bringing. There was one from the Stephen Mitchell, one little part of the Stephen Mitchell translation that I feel like brings a nice clarity to some of what we're kind of like trying to figure out here, which
Mhm.
is this idea. And this is, I think, the difference between someone who's oriented towards life, someone who's oriented towards death, and someone who's maybe not even noticing. And then this one is it says he doesn't think about his actions, they flow from the core of his being. He holds nothing back from life, therefore, he's ready for death.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing to like tie these two dimensions of like, if you're looking for death, you're holding back, right? But
Hmm.
if you're oriented towards life, it's like this idea like it's the person just giving their all to life and they're not going to fear death because they're putting it all on the table. It's an interesting way to think about this, and
Yeah, for
especially to
sure.
this
And we've
point that
talked about
Ursula
this
made.
before in a previous video, like the martial artist, the one that is, or any kind of fighter
Hmm.
in terms of aggression versus defense, right? And there
Hmm.
are people that are all about the aggression.
Hmm.
And in the Proverbs, that type of warrior has already lost the battle because they're so
Mm.
forward thinking, they're so into the fight, the violent part, which is like,
Hmm.
much closer to the death part than
Yes.
self-preservation life part of being able to know
Hmm.
how to diffuse situations before it turns into a battle. Of course, be ready
Hmm.
if it does escalate,
Hmm.
but the true warrior fights without using violence. That's also from
Hmm.
the Art of War. Sun Tzu
Hmm.
talks about that a lot too. So I see some parallels going on here
Hmm.
too. Another thing that kind of struck me, if I may, about the organs
Hmm.
is I wonder if you can kind of, and I'd have to do a little bit more research. I know a bit about how the organs work and some of the meridians and energetically
Hmm.
what they're tied to, but I'm not a licensed Chinese
Yeah.
doctor or anything, acupuncturist. So I have general knowledge, but
Yeah.
I wonder if in context with this, if there's a way of looking at it where some organs are really tied to the life component of like
Mm-hmm.
the heart's dealing with the blood, the
Mm-hmm.
lifeblood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you got the lungs bringing in the air
Mm-hmm.
and transforming the air. That's like all life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have things like the digestive system and the
Mm-hmm.
gallbladder and the liver that deal with like detoxifying, pulling poisons and
Mm-hmm.
toxins out of the body, dealing with death, all those
Mm-hmm.
more deathly pathogens and chemicals and
Mm-hmm.
toxins and all this stuff that is more closely related to the death side. And then you have stuff in there that's just kind of like going about its day, doing its thing. Maybe that's what could that be? The bladder or something, it's like it just knows what to do and it just goes through the motions, not for one way or the other. It has the role to play, it has the function and does the
Mm.
function and doesn't think about it. So I just wonder if we can maybe weave that in a little bit where
Yeah.
in the organ system, there are these buckets
Mm-hmm.
of systems that work in big overarching arcs or
Yeah.
like
That's
these
really,
are higher level processes, and then under those are like the microprocessors, right?
yeah. That is really interesting. And I'm gonna admit, I'm having a hard time weaving it only because something else is emerging from the imagery you're painting,
Yeah, let's hear
which
it.
is which is sort of like, and maybe it's because it's been in my mind, so it's sort of in my mind already, coming to this meeting, which is like, one of the most pronounced dynamics, especially right now in the age of hyperstimuli and hyperstress, is this idea of like survival mode,
Hmm.
right? And how you know, certain states of hypervigilance in the human organism creates a hypervigilant state where it's focused on survival only, right? And there are some really powerful things that the body does in response to that survival mode that support its sort of strengthening in the moment to brace for impact or whatever it needs to do, right? But prolonged time in these states does detrimental things to the human systems, right? All the biological systems of the human organism, right? Whether that's, the way that stress kind of affects like the way we retain water and all these other things, right? And inflammation in the body, all the way to even the way the brain works, where there's science that shows that like the prefrontal cortex, which is that more like mammalian part on top of the more reptilian kind of part, if you think about it like from an
Hmm.
evolutionary biology standpoint, that gets less blood and less attention because we're down here in the limbic system and we're like getting ready for this. So it doesn't really answer your question, but I do feel like this organ thing is bringing us to the centrality of the human body in understanding all of these dynamics that are happening within us and the
Yes.
power of tapping into all that felt sensory data that helps us understand where we might be in that life death kind of gradient.
Yes. Amazing. Yeah, well said. I appreciate that point of view. And that reminds me a lot of the vagus nerve. And I won't get into this
Mm.
because that's a whole thing to derail us from the rest of
Hmm.
this chapter. But just briefly, we have that's where the whole fight or flight and freeze
Yes,
thing comes
yes,
from, which is deeply connected to the hormones and the hormone
yes.
responses, which are
It's
tied to
cascading.
glands,
Yep,
which are tied to organs. So that's why there
yep,
are systems that work all throughout our body on the
yep,
physical plane to the energetic plane to the spiritual plane to the
yes,
and above
yep,
astral, you know.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to dissect even in that first paragraph. But there's some other
Yes.
interesting things here that they talk about. They move on towards the imagery of I have in this book a rhinoceros or a tiger. I think there was something mentioned in yours
There's
about
a
a
bull.
tiger
Yeah,
too,
and a tiger.
bull,
Yep,
and how these animals they are seen in an aggressive light and they have weapons, teeth and claws, and it can really hurt you and or kill you. But to have that relationship with death that is actually embracing death almost as an equal counterpart to life and not having that fear of death. You'll never truly die because you're already part of all
Mm.
Tao, right? You are already
Mm-hmm.
eternal if you
Mm-hmm.
know that. And all this search about immortality and stuff, like we have that
Mm-hmm.
at our fingertips by letting go of these debilitating notions such as death. And as soon as you do that, you already are like ascended, still here in the human plane, but
Hmm.
you're already moving into that more master status of just being
Hmm.
more in accord with the Tao, right?
Hmm. Wow. That's really powerful. And like to kind of thread what you're saying with what we were just saying about like the physical systems, that conceptual piece that's operating at the level of like mind and spirit, that kind of Shen energy almost, like that has the power to override this sort of cascading effects in systems where one thing triggers one thing and all of a sudden you're producing a ton of cortisol and adrenaline, right? And then now your body is like in a whole different hormonal
Out of control. Yeah.
state, right? And so having that sort of ability to sort of arrest some of those hormonal cascades can be extremely powerful. And it comes with sort of unlocking this higher wisdom of, yeah, this the eternal nature of our very being, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that goes even deeper into theory when you think about this is how people unlock special abilities and things like that. When you
Yeah,
start releasing these preconceived notions, you start accessing more brain power and tapping more into the energy field, the
yeah,
elemental fields,
yeah,
and you can maybe like have a connection with something. There's so much in our lore and pop culture about
yeah,
special abilities
yeah,
and so much mystery around discoveries from ancient sites and stuff. They're like, humans couldn't have built this stuff. It had to
yeah,
be aliens. But maybe they were just tapping into some greater force and
yeah,
were able to, have these abilities because they were not just letting go of the negative, but really embracing the life, right? And talk about
yes,
those 3 of 10 embracing life and all it has to offer, not just the physical realm. There's so much
yes,
beauty in the emotional realm and the psychological
yes.
realm. And that's for some reason scary to a lot of humans, those realms. But when
It
you
is.
embrace them, and trust me, I'm no master on this. I definitely
Neither am I.
it's a learning process for most of us, but at least have it be a learning process and not be unable or unwilling to connect with these deeper concepts. Because, and
Yes.
oftentimes, maybe you get through some little uncomfortable period, but oftentimes it's so rewarding.
Definitely, it definitely, and it's like an endless tool you can come back to, right? Which is why some of these ancient traditions, including Taoism, have so much focus on things like meditation and contemplative states, right? Or like movement practice that gets you into a certain space that allows you to, we don't lose our temporality, like we're part of time, like or time's emerging with our actions, right? But that we have access to things that are outside of time, right? And
Yes.
that's what the Tao is. That's the world of the Tao, right? The Tao doesn't exist in time. It's an
Yeah.
unchanging state of potential that always is.
Mhm.
And all of our temporal expressions are just, the latest wave of that great ocean that is the Tao, right? In this framework. And like you said, tapping into those thoughts, and even like you said, like where it's like, um, well, anyway, like tapping into those higher dimensional thinking, essentially, right? Looking beyond the dimensions of what we would call like third and fourth dimension of like time, right? There's other perspectives that are available to us, especially if we enter those states through movement, through stillness, through silence, through these
Mhm.
really ancient practices
Mhm.
that we know are worth cultivating.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think you alluded to something earlier when you were talking about how having that deep association or connection to death and that type of thinking can almost manifest it, right? Can almost invite it, right?
And that's kind of what they're saying here with this
Yeah,
one, where it's like there's nowhere for the death to enter because
yeah. You're not
you're not
inviting
putting
it
it into the
in.
field.
Yeah, yeah. So the bull would or the tiger wouldn't even see you as a threat, and it wouldn't have any reason to attack you. So
Yes.
you might as well be another tree in the jungle
Yes.
that they have a symbiotic relationship with and no need for violence to happen.
Exactly. And like this might take us way too far out, so I apologize, but this is just one of those juicy ones. So like let's bring it
Yeah,
out a little bit
yeah, let's
more,
check it out.
which is like if you take people who have had near-death experiences, it's just one example. Seriously, in terms of all the accounts that I've read and all the testimonies I've read, it's clear that what many people describe is some sort of space that is outside of time, right? Where they're able to see the trajectories that their life can take and has taken
Hmm.
from a position outside of time.
Yes.
And what this is saying,
Multidimensional.
multidimensional, exactly. And so what this is basically saying is like those who are fully with the Tao have access to this. Whether they're conscious of it or not doesn't matter necessarily. But if you have access to that map of potentiality outside of time, then yeah, there's nowhere for death to enter because there's no timeline where death happens. You can kind of, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of a weird way to say basically like tapping into this space outside of time through the Taoist practices and cultivating that these beautiful traditions do. It allows you to be more effortlessly with the Tao, whether it's conscious, like, oh, I know what's going to happen, or I see it. Like, 'cause some people do. I think there are, like you said, abilities. I think there are mystics who have cultivated this so much that they can actually feel timelines in
Yeah.
real time. That making certain decisions affect, like I think very possible, and I've met people that seem to have some of that already. So I think it's possible. But even if we just take NDE experiencers as valid data, it
Yeah.
backs up what this is saying, basically,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And typically people come back with a whole new renewed sense of how to view the
Exactly.
world.
And a lack of a fear of death, which
Yeah.
makes them more powerful,
More
and not just more
compassionate,
powerful,
right?
more compassionate, and
Empathetic,
more and all those things, but more importantly, I'd say at the fundamental level, more themselves. They're more now
more
expressing
authentic.
that core being that they are. That lifetime is
Yeah.
itself a
It's
core
like the
expression of
snake
some parts
sheds
of
the
the Taoist.
skin. The
It
snake
sheds the
sheds the
skin.
skin. And we are in that year right now in the Chinese New Year. It is the year of the snake, 2025. So, and I know myself has gone through some massive transformations this year. I know a lot of people
Word.
that have gone and still are going through massive transformations this year. And a lot of people don't necessarily know why the world is crazy. Why is this
Yeah.
happening? I don't know, but
Yeah.
maybe there are some more mystical things at work here. And it's no
Seasonal energy,
coincidence to me
archetypal.
that this is a
Yeah.
massive year of transformation for so
Yeah.
many, when it being the year of the snake. And that's exactly what it symbolizes. At the same time, it's the year of the wood snake. So in the five element theory, we have the wood element coming in, which signifies
Mm,
expansion and growth.
growth.
So
Yeah.
you're going through this massive transformation
Yep.
to grow, to expand your awareness,
Wow. Look
and
at
your
that.
perceptions, to expand your authenticity and your passions and your purposes and all of that stuff because of, like all the systems are breaking down and all this crazy stuff in the world, but there's a greater conscious thing going on here that is juicy. It's
It
very
is. And
juicy.
I'm really
So
glad you brought
it's
in that
interesting
pattern.
how we can look at these things and they're so defined with these animals or these
Mm-hmm.
elements. And we can say, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's kind of like that, but it's just so beautifully mapped out that there
Mm-hmm.
had to be some really serious thought and intention behind these systems that were created, astrology and all that stuff.
And lived experience checks, right? They've been
Yeah,
tested
and
over
it's
thousands of years.
exactly, and it's essentially peer reviewed by all of humanity over
Yeah, by different astrologers and people who lived
cultures,
this.
bring into the
Yeah.
same ideas and notions into a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
things. And this is definitely going off on a tangent a
It
bit,
is.
but it still can relate to that transformational quality
Yeah.
of changing your perception around the two most basic things every single living organism on this planet experiences: life and death.
Yep.
There's no
Yep.
escaping it, right? If you are here,
You
you
will die.
you will not be here at some point. And if you're not here, maybe you will be here at some point. It's all in flux, and there's a lot of religious implications we can get into here, and a lot of people think very differently about all this stuff, and that's
Yeah.
that's great. But this is just one perception, but an interesting one nonetheless.
Definitely.
Anything you'd like to add?
Definitely. No, I'm just
We took
returning
this
back.
one on a
We
ride.
did. This one went on a couple tangents, so thank you for everyone that stayed with us as we off-roaded. But the only thing that I'm saying, like, just to wrap up this is like going back to her definition where she called this chapter the love of life. I think it's
Mm,
a really interesting way to like wrap up what we're saying because these dynamics take life and death cycle as like this thing of fear to a place of empowerment. And
mm,
that's pretty powerful.
Yes, yes. Yeah, anyone going through any kind of transformation will probably agree to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the death part of the transformation process is always sucks, but it's a necessary part of the process.
hmm Yep. Yeah, we unfortunately or fortunately need destruction in order for creation to happen, and vice versa. It's the yin and the
Yeah.
yang, right? They work in
Yes.
tandem and unison. It is the Tao, all the things, and just having that awareness of these, I don't know if you want to call them systems or beliefs or theories or
System
whatever.
dynamics. Yeah, the dynamics of the
Just
Tao
the
and its
awareness of
endless
them
expression.
can bring a lot of change, whether you
Yeah.
understand them or grasp them deeply or relate to them or not. They're thought provoking in such a way that even the thought is like, wow, yeah, never thought of it that way. Interesting. So we'd love to hear what you have to think. If you stuck with us this far, we thank you. And please drop a line in the comments. We'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on this number 50 or the Tao in general or anything that relates to the Tao that might be circulating through your mind. They're like, oh, yeah, they're not saying the same words, but something similar. We'd love to hear it, because we're all about just interpretations here. So please like and subscribe, share with a friend if you think they'd be interested, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.